It happened on a sunny Sunday afternoon in Maplewood, Illinois, my grandson Liam's 22nd birthday. The whole Crawford family gathered at my daughter-in-law Melissa's brand new mansion, all glass walls and white marble floors that smelled of bleach and expensive perfume. I arrived late, holding a small silver tin wrapped with a red ribbon. It rattled softly, just a few candies inside. Everyone else had brought iPhones, sneakers, or envelopes stuffed with cash. I handed my gift to Liam and said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." He looked at it, smirked, and laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Candy Grandma. That's adorable. Dollar Tree must love you." The room burst into laughter. Even Melissa hid her smile behind a champagne glass. I felt my cheeks burn, but I forced a gentle smile. "Not every candy is sweet because of sugar, Liam," I said quietly. He rolled his eyes and tossed the tin onto the table like it was trash. I excused myself to the porch, pretending to admire the garden lights, but inside something old and cold stirred in my chest, a memory buried for 25 years. That night after the guests left, Liam texted me a photo of the tin. "You forgot your antique candy box," he joked. He didn't know that one of those cheap candies wasn't candy at all. Inside the wrapper was a folded piece of yellowed paper, one I'd hidden there decades ago before his mother ever married my son. When he finally opened it, he'd find a string of numbers and a name that would make him question everything he thought he knew about our family. But tell me, if your own grandson laughed at your gift, would you still smile, or would you teach him why some sweets taste bitter? My name is Helen Crawford, 72 years old, retired bank clerk, widow for nearly 3 decades. I live in a small brick duplex on the corner of Maple and 6th Street, across from the same grocery store where I once bought diapers for my son. The house smells faintly of cedar and old paper. The wallpaper peels near the kitchen window, and the clock above the stove ticks just a bit too loud at night. I've never been rich, but I've always been steady. I paid my mortgage. I cooked my own meals. I never missed a birthday. But in this family, steadiness means nothing. Only money earns respect. After my husband Charles died from a stroke in 1996, I raised our son Michael alone while working long hours at First Maplewood Bank. I typed reports until my fingers cramped, wore the same pair of shoes for years, and saved every dime for his education. When he married Melissa, a pretty real estate agent with perfect hair and sharper ambitions, I believed she would love him for the good man he was. I was wrong. Melissa came from a family that measured love by square footage. She never said it outright, but I could feel it, the judgment in her eyes when she visited my modest home, the polite smile when I offered her coffee in my mismatched cups. After Michael's car accident 5 years ago, she changed completely. She stopped calling me Mom and started calling me Helen. The warmth disappeared, replaced by cold civility. I remember one Thanksgiving vividly. She hosted it, of course, her idea of family unity. The table looked like a magazine photo, gold cutlery, white roses, crystal glasses. When I arrived with a pumpkin pie I baked myself, she whispered to a friend. She still bakes. Isn't that quaint? Even Liam, my grandson, started copying her tone. He was 15 then, and I adored him. I once took him fishing by Maple Creek, packed sandwiches, told him stories about his father's childhood. But as he grew older, the boy I loved disappeared behind designer clothes and smirks. He'd show me his new sneakers and say, "Don't worry, Grandma, I'll buy you some when I'm rich." He didn't know that I once signed the papers that paid for his father's surgery, that I sold my husband's tools, my wedding ring, and half my furniture just to cover the bills while Melissa was too busy closing house deals. And when Michael died, she didn't even let me hold his hand one last time. The hospital called me hours later. She said it was too painful to have everyone there. Painful for her, maybe. Since that day, I've been the quiet shadow in their bright, polished world, the old woman they invite out of obligation. But I learned something from years at the bank. People reveal themselves most when they think no one's watching. So I kept watching. I listened. I smiled when they laughed at my thrift store clothes. I nodded when Melissa suggested I downsize to assisted living. I even let Liam call me vintage, because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's storage of memories, of evidence of secrets that can topple kingdoms built on arrogance. And as I sat on my porch that night after his birthday, holding the empty candy tin, I realized something. They thought they'd humiliated me in front of the family. But in truth, they'd just opened a door I'd kept locked for 25 years. A door I swore I'd never touch again, until someone reminded me what disrespect really felt like. The morning after Liam's birthday, I woke up to the sound of rain hitting the tin roof of my porch. Maplewood was gray and quiet, the kind of day that makes old bones ache and old memories louder. I brewed a small pot of coffee, the same brand I'd bought for years, Folger's Classic Roast, and sat at my kitchen table covered with yellowed newspaper clippings I could never bring myself to throw away. Among them was a photograph of Michael, my son, smiling beside a beat-up blue pickup. He was only 34 when he died. I ran my thumb over his face and whispered, "You'd be ashamed of what they've become, Mikey." A knock on the door startled me. Melissa never came unannounced. She hated the smell of old houses. Yet there she was, standing under a red umbrella, holding a beige folder. "Hi, Helen," she said. "Not Mom, not even Mother. Just Helen. You missed signing the property tax form. I thought I'd drop it off." I invited her in. She glanced around, eyes sweeping the room like a realtor assessing damage. "You should really think about selling this place," she said, sitting down without asking. "The market's good right now. You could move into a retirement community. They even have those little buses that drive you to the mall." I stirred my coffee and smiled politely. "And leave all my memories here alone, I think they'd miss me." She didn't laugh. Instead, she opened the folder and slid a pen toward me. "Just sign here, please. It's better if I handle these things for you." You know how complicated bills can get at your age? That word, your age, it cut deeper than any insult. But I signed as I always did, because arguing only fed her sense of power. And besides, I had my own reasons for playing the fragile old woman. When she left, I looked out the window. Her car, a shiny black BMW, reflected the gray sky like a mirror. She didn't wave goodbye. She never did. That night, I got a call from Liam. "Grandma, Mom says you're struggling to pay bills. I can lend you some money." His voice was syrupy sweet, too polite to be real. "That's kind of you, dear," I said. "But I'm fine. I still have some savings." "Savings?" He laughed. "What savings? You worked at a bank, not owned one." I didn't answer. He thought silence meant defeat, but silence was my oldest friend. After we hung up, I went to the closet in my bedroom and opened an old cedar box that smelled faintly of mint. Inside were relics of another life, a silver locket, a letter from the bank's founder, and a small notebook tied with twine. The first page read, "Account number 03 FMB 241 hold for confirmation upon death of second signer." No one else alive knew what that meant, not even Melissa, especially not her. A week later, she called again, this time angry. "Helen, why didn't you tell me you transferred money to an old account? The bank said they can't locate it." I feigned confusion. "I must have forgotten, dear." "You know memory at my age." She exhaled sharply. "You're being difficult again." Maybe I said softly. Or maybe I'm just remembering things you'd rather I forgot. That shut her up. For the first time in years, I had control of the silence. When the call ended, I looked at the candy tin sitting on my table. One of the candies was missing the one I'd slipped the old paper into. If Liam had already found it, things were about to move faster than I'd planned. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled like wet earth and something else changed. I stood by the window and whispered to the empty street. "You wanted me small and quiet, Melissa. But quiet doesn't mean harmless. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't shouting back, it's letting time do the talking. But tell me, how long would you stay silent before teaching someone what silence can really cost? Thanksgiving 3 years ago was the last time I ever sat at Melissa's dining table. I remember everything, the smell of roasted turkey and expensive candles, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the way my chair always felt like the coldest one in the room. I had baked my pumpkin pie at 5 that morning, the way my mother taught me real butter, not canned filling. I carried it across town on the bus, wrapped in foil to keep it warm. When I arrived, Melissa greeted me with that tight-lipped smile she wore when she was pretending to be kind. "Oh, Helen, you brought something," she said, her eyes darting toward the gleaming dessert buffet already set up by a professional caterer. "Just my pie," I said. "It's Michael's favorite. I thought Liam might like it too." She laughed softly, tilting her head. "That's sweet. But you know Liam doesn't really eat homemade sweets anymore, too much sugar." That word again, sweet. But she made it sound poisonous. During dinner, I sat at the far end of the table. Everyone was dressed in designer clothes, talking about business trips, new Teslas, and golf memberships. When I tried to tell a story about Michael fixing our old washing machine when he was 16, Melissa interrupted. "Oh, Liam just bought his own washer last week. A Samsung smart one. It texts you when your laundry's done," everyone laughed. My story died mid-sentence. Later, when I offered to serve dessert, Melissa waved her hand. "It's fine, Helen. The caterers will handle it. Why don't you sit and rest?" But the caterers never served my pie. I watched them clear it off the counter and slide it still wrapped into the trash bin, like it was nothing. Liam saw it too. He smirked. "Sorry, Grandma. Store rules, no outside food." That was the first time I felt something inside me crack. Not anger, not even sadness. Something colder, like a switch flipping. After dinner, I went out to the porch where the night was quiet except for the hum of the pool lights. I clutched my empty hands and remembered another night long ago, one far worse. It was the night Michael was in the hospital, machines beeping doctors, whispering words I didn't understand. I'd sold my house a week earlier to pay for his treatment. Melissa had promised she'd help handle the papers. I trusted her. She was family. But when I looked at the final sale receipt, my name was missing. The money had gone into her account, not mine. When I confronted her, she cried, hugged me, said it was just a misunderstanding that left me homeless for 6 months. And yet I forgave her. I told myself Michael needed peace more than I needed justice. When he died, I kept silent because grief felt heavier than revenge. But that Thanksgiving night, as I watched my pie slide into the trash and heard my grandson laugh, all the years of silence came rushing back like floodwater. I realized I'd traded my dignity for peace. And peace, built on humiliation, never lasts. So I made a promise to myself on that porch I would stop begging for respect from people who only saw weakness. I would wait just as I had waited all my life, but next time I'd be the one holding the key. That promise led me to open an old box in my attic the very next day, the one labeled Charles Private. Inside, wrapped in a faded bank envelope, was the first clue to a secret I had buried for 25 years. And that secret would soon teach Melissa and Liam what real inheritance looks like. They thought that night had broken me. But tell me, have you ever been pushed so far down that you finally discovered how deep your strength really goes? The morning after that Thanksgiving, I climbed into my attic for the first time in years. The air was thick with dust, and memories boxes stacked like tombstones of a life long gone. A single beam of sunlight fell across one of them, labeled in my late husband's neat handwriting, Charles, Private. My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside were old photographs, brittle pay stubs, and a small metal box engraved with the initials FMB, First Maplewood Bank. I hadn't seen that box since 1999. I worked at that bank for 35 years, back when people still trusted a handshake. I wasn't just a clerk. I was the keeper of other people's secrets. I knew which businessman was about to go bankrupt, which widow was hiding gold coins in a safety deposit box, which family forged signatures to hide tax debts. But in the summer of '99, something happened that changed my life and cost me everything. Our branch manager, Mr. Henry Duvall, was the kind of man who wore charm like cologne. He'd stop by my desk with a smile and a joke, but behind those perfect teeth was a predator. One afternoon, while I was filing account statements, I found something strange. Multiple transfers, large ones being funneled into a series of shell accounts under false names. At first, I thought it was a system glitch, but the handwriting on the paper slips, the same elegant looping script, was unmistakable. It was Henry's. I confronted him quietly after hours. "Mr. Duvall, there's a discrepancy in the transfers from the corporate accounts." He smiled, calm as ever. "Helen, you're sharp as always, But sometimes it's better not to look too closely. You've got retirement coming up, don't you? Something about his tone chilled me. That night, I took copies of the records home, every page, every transfer. A week later, a man from the State Financial Crimes Bureau showed up at my door asking questions. Someone had tipped them off anonymously. Only it wasn't me. When the investigation began, Henry vanished, and so did a large sum of money. The next morning, my husband Charles was found unconscious in our garage. The police said it was a heart attack brought on by stress, but I knew better. Charles had been the second authorized signer on Henry's accounts, not by choice, but by blackmail. Before he died, he left me a single envelope with one handwritten note, "Protect the number. When the time is right, you'll know what to do." Inside that envelope was a single slip of paper, a bank account code, nothing more. No name, no balance, just a string of numbers and the faint smell of his cologne. I hid that paper inside the only thing nobody would ever steal, a tin of cheap candy I kept on my desk. When the bank shut down, the case quietly calling it a clerical error, I took early retirement and walked away with my dignity and my secret intact. Years passed. The candy tin became a family joke. Every Christmas, I'd fill it with mints and give it to my son, then to Liam when he was old enough. It wasn't just tradition, it was camouflage. The code was still there, sealed under a false bottom, waiting for the right moment. As I sat in that dusty attic, the weight of the metal box on my lap, I whispered, "Charles, maybe the right moment is finally here." I opened the FMB box. Inside was an old ledger and at the back a key, a small brass key labeled Safety Deposit 24-1 Benzine. I ran my fingers over it. My heart pounded not from fear but from something else, a spark I hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was time to stop being the quiet widow. Maybe it was time for my family to learn that sometimes the poorest woman in the room holds the richest secret. The rain outside turned into thunder echoing through the house. I closed the box, locked it again, and whispered to the empty air, "If they want my candy so badly, let them taste the truth that's inside." I didn't know it yet, but that little brass key would unlock more than a vault. It would open a past that refused to stay buried. Tell me if you discovered a secret that could destroy your family or finally set you free. Which would you choose? The following week, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like a whisper from the past. That brass key from Safety Deposit 2417 sat on my nightstand, glinting faintly under the lamplight. I hadn't touched it since that night in the attic, but I could feel its weight, not metal but memory. On Friday morning, I decided to visit the old First Maplewood Bank building. It wasn't a bank anymore. The sign had faded, the glass doors now plastered with "For Lease" notices. But when I stepped inside the lobby, the smell of lemon polish and paper dust hit me, and for a moment, I was 30 years younger, sitting at my desk typing with sore fingers, listening to Henry Duval's expensive shoes clicking across the marble floor. I ran my hand across the counter where my nameplate used to sit. Helen Crawford, Accounts Division. A security guard peeked his head in. "Ma'am, we're closed to the public." "I know," I said softly. "I used to work here." He nodded politely but didn't understand. No one did. That afternoon, I returned home and placed the brass key inside the candy tin, the same one Liam had laughed at. The hollow clink it made was strangely satisfying. Then I took out the folded, yellowed paper, the account code my husband left me, and stared at the faded ink, 03 FMB 2417. Confirm upon death of second signer. I realized something chilling. Charles had been the first signer, and the second one could only be Henry Duval. If he was truly dead, that account might be free. But if not, the money and the secret behind it still belonged to him. I needed proof. That night, I called an old friend, Evelyn Harper, my former colleague, now a retired branch auditor living in Naperville. Evelyn owed me a favor or two. We'd covered for each other more times than I could count back in the day. Helen Crawford, Lord. "I haven't heard that name since we still wore pantyhose to work," she said with a laugh. "Do you still have access to the old bank archive system?" Her tone shifted immediately. "Helen, what are you getting into? Just tying up old memories." She sighed, then whispered, "Give me the code." When I read it aloud, she went silent for a long time. "Helen, this account isn't closed. It's dormant, but it's under a restricted flag law enforcement freeze. Why are you asking about this?" "Because I think someone's about to find it. Don't do anything rash, Helen. That code is evidence from the Duval case. You could open old wounds you can't close again. But that's the thing about old wounds. Sometimes they have to bleed before they can heal." I spent the next few days preparing. I took the tin down from the shelf, polished it, and refilled it with wrapped candies. Except one. The empty wrapper I replaced with the folded note and the brass key taped carefully beneath the bottom lid. Then I tied the ribbon just as before, tight, neat, innocent. It wasn't a gift anymore. It was bait. I told myself it was symbolic, poetic, even to hide the truth in plain sight inside the very thing they mocked me for. I didn't expect Liam to find it so soon, but perhaps fate was tired of waiting. The night before his birthday, I sat by the window watching the lights in their mansion across town. I saw silhouettes moving, laughter spilling into the cold air. My family, my blood, and yet strangers. I whispered to the darkness, "You laughed at the candy, Liam, but inside that sweetness is the truth of who you really are." I closed the window and turned off the lamp. Tomorrow I would hand him the tin the same way I'd handed it to his father years ago. Only this time I wasn't giving love. I was giving consequence. In the soft quiet of that night, the brass key clicked once inside the tin like a heartbeat. I didn't know if it would bring justice or chaos. But either way, the truth was finally awake. If you had the chance to reveal a family secret that could shatter everything, would you do it for justice or for peace? The night after the party, the house was finally quiet again. Melissa was in her home office talking loudly on the phone about a new client in Chicago. Liam sat in the living room surrounded by boxes of expensive gifts, watches, sneakers, envelopes full of cash from his friends. My little tin of candy sat off to the side, forgotten next to the empty champagne glasses, until curiosity got the better of him. "Hey, Mom," Liam called out. "Guess what Grandma gave me candy?" Melissa laughed through the doorway. "Well, maybe it's vintage candy worth a fortune on eBay." "Yeah, maybe there's gold inside," Liam joked, shaking the tin. It rattled. "Actually, there's something in here." He peeled back the ribbon, opened the lid, and frowned. Inside were peppermint candies, all perfectly wrapped in foil except one. The wrapper looked old, almost yellow. He unwrapped it slowly, expecting to find a melted sweet, but instead a tiny folded paper slid out and fluttered onto the glass table. On it, written in faded ink, was a series of numbers and letters. 03 FMB 2417, Michael D. Crawford. "Who the hell is Michael D. Crawford?" he muttered. Melissa appeared behind him. When she saw the name, the color drained from her face. "That's your father's full name. Why would she—" She snatched the paper and stared at it. "FMB, that's First Maplewood Bank. That place closed decades ago. So what Grandma gave me an expired account number as a gift, no." She whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Your grandfather worked there, and your father once told me something about an inheritance that never came." The next morning, Melissa didn't go to work. She sat at the dining table with her laptop typing furiously. Liam hovered behind her. "Look, there's still a private database for First Maplewood Bank," she said. "Most records were moved to a parent company, Maplewood Financial Holdings. Maybe this account's still in the system. If it is, can we access it? If it's unclaimed and under Dad's name, we might." Liam grinned. "So Grandma actually left me something valuable." Melissa stopped typing. "No, she didn't give this to you. She hid it. She's hiding something." That thought consumed her. Within hours, she was calling old contacts, real estate lawyers, bankers, even a friend in the county clerk's office. I didn't know it at the time, but word travels fast in Maplewood. By evening, one of my former colleagues called me. "Helen Evelyn said over the phone, your daughter-in-law's been asking about account 03 FMB D41 scene. She's serious. She even asked if you were still mentally sound to handle finances." I took a slow breath. "So it begins," I murmured. Meanwhile, in that bright kitchen across town, Liam grew more obsessed. He searched every website, every banking forum, trying to decode what those numbers meant. Then late that night, he found a cached financial record listing dormant private equity accounts tied to Maplewood Financial. And right there, buried in the list, was the code. Next to it, estimated value $8,200,000. Status locked. Liam's hands trembled. "Mom, it's real." Melissa leaned in. Her eyes lit up with something sharp and greedy. "Then we need to unlock it before your grandmother does." "But how?" "It says it's under Dad's name. Then we'll make it under ours." She poured herself a glass of wine, her voice calm, steady. "She's old Liam. Confused. If the bank thinks she's incompetent, the assets could transfer to next of kin. That's illegal. It's family," she said. "And besides, she'll never know." But I did know. I always knew. That night, while they plotted, I was sitting at my small kitchen table with my cup of chamomile tea, staring at the rain streaking down the window. I could almost feel Charles's presence in the room, my late husband, the man who'd warned me that greed had a scent. And right then, I smelled it again, through memory, through years, the scent of arrogance. I smiled to myself and whispered, "Let them come looking. The trap's already set." I placed the candy tin back on the counter and turned off the light. Tomorrow, they'd make their move. And when they did, they'd find that the sweetest things in life often come with poison inside. Have you ever watched someone dig for treasure knowing the real thing they'll uncover is their own downfall? 2 days later, Melissa showed up at my house unannounced. Her perfume arrived before she did sharp floral expensive. She stood in my doorway wearing heels too tall for comfort and a smile too practiced to be kind. "Helen, darling, you didn't answer my texts. I was worried about you," she said, stepping inside before I even invited her. I raised an eyebrow. "You were worried or you were curious?" She laughed, pretending not to hear the bite in my tone. "I just wanted to check in, after Liam's birthday." "He's still talking about your gift." "So sweet of you, sweet," I echoed softly. That seems to be everyone's favorite word lately. She looked around, pretending to admire my modest living room. Her gaze lingered on the candy tin sitting on the side table. "There it is. The famous candy box," she said with mock delight. "Can I take a closer look?" I gave her a long, steady stare before nodding. She picked it up like a museum piece, turning it over in her manicured hands, looking for something she didn't understand. "You always loved keeping little mementos," she said. "So sentimental." "Some memories are worth more than they look," I replied. Her smile flickered just a moment, then returned. "Liam and I were at the bank yesterday. We met the branch manager at Maplewood Financial Holdings. Wonderful man. We asked about your old accounts just to make sure everything's in order. In case anything happens. In case I die," I said, my voice calm as glass. Melissa blinked. "Oh, don't be dramatic, Helen. I'm just being practical. You don't want your estate to be a mess." "My estate is quite organized," I said, sipping my tea, "and locked tighter than you'd imagine." That night, she made her real move. Evelyn called me in a panic at nearly 10 o'clock. "Helen, your daughter-in-law came to the downtown records office today with a lawyer. She requested authorization for power of attorney under the pretense of your declining mental health. They're pushing it through quietly." My heart didn't race. It didn't need to. I'd expected this. "Thank you, Evelyn," I said. "Let them sign what they wish. They're walking straight into their own audit. Helen, you sound far too calm." Because I've been preparing for this moment for 25 years. Meanwhile, at the other end of the town in their marble kitchen, lit by pendant lamps, Melissa and Liam sat with the lawyer she'd hired, Mr. Grant, a man whose suit was expensive enough to silence his conscience. "It's simple," Grant explained. "Once we declare Ms. Crawford unfit to manage her finances, the estate executor, you, Mrs. Crawford, will have full access to dormant family accounts. All we need is medical corroboration and one banking signature." Liam frowned. "But what if she finds out?" Melissa smirked. "She won't. She's old. She barely uses her phone. And even if she does find out, she won't understand the paperwork." "And the account number?" Grant asked. Melissa pulled out the slip of paper and slid it across the table. 03 FMB 241 Dunseen. It's under my late husband's name. There's an old safety deposit box tied to it, something about a secondary signer. If it's inactive, the funds can legally transfer to me. Grant's eyes widened slightly. That code, I've seen similar ones tied to federal audits. Are you sure this is safe? I'm sure, Melissa said, leaning in. By the time anyone asks questions, it'll be too late. Liam looked uneasy, but greed is a louder voice than guilt. All right, he said finally. Let's do it. The next day, I watched from across the street as Melissa's BMW pulled into the Maplewood Financial parking lot. I'd called ahead not to warn them, but to schedule something of my own. When she entered the lobby, she found a man already waiting Mr. Wallace, the new branch director. Behind him stood a woman in a gray suit. Melissa thought she was a secretary. She wasn't. She was from the Federal Financial Crimes Division. Mrs. Crawford Wallace greeted, "We received your request regarding your mother-in-law's accounts. I just need to verify your identity and your authorization." "Of course," Melissa said smoothly, handing over the documents Grant had prepared. "As you can see, Helen Crawford has been struggling mentally. We're just trying to help her." The woman in gray leaned forward. "May I see the signature?" She examined it silently, then looked up. "This is interesting, Miss Crawford. Are you aware that falsifying medical documents to gain access to a frozen federal account is a criminal offense?" Melissa froze. "Excuse me. Account 03FMB241 in scene isn't just dormant. It's flagged as evidence in an open investigation. And your mother-in-law, she's listed as a protected witness in that file." The blood drained from Melissa's face. Protected witness. Yes. She helped expose a multi-million-dollar embezzlement ring 25 years ago. This account isn't yours to claim, it's hers to testify about. Before Melissa could speak, the lobby doors opened. I walked in, slowly, quietly. "Oh, Melissa," I said. "You really should have read the fine print." She turned to me, pale and shaking. You knew?" "Of course I knew," I said. "I was the one who gave you the map. I just wanted to see how far you'd go before falling in." Her lips trembled. Liam stood beside her, stunned, clutching the candy tin he'd brought along like it might still save him. "You said the box had nothing valuable," he whispered. "It didn't," I said softly, "until you touched it." That day, Melissa's lawyer was escorted out by the federal agent. And as for my dear daughter-in-law, she wasn't arrested. Not yet. But her name was added to a very long list of people under investigation. When I left the bank, I didn't look back. The sun was bright, almost blinding, as if washing everything clean. But the truth was just beginning to get dirty again. Sometimes the sweetest trap is the one they walk into smiling. But tell me, if someone you loved tried to steal your past, would you forgive them or make them choke on it? The air inside Maplewood Financial that morning was sharp and cold, like the kind that smells of metal and regret. The floor-to-ceiling windows glared sunlight onto the marble tiles, and for a moment it felt less like a bank and more like a stage one I had been rehearsing for 25 years. Melissa stood frozen, clutching her designer purse like a shield. Liam hovered behind her, shifting his weight, pale and silent. The woman from the Federal Financial Crimes Division, Agent Monroe, closed the folder she'd been reviewing and looked at me with a faint, knowing smile. "Mrs. Crawford," she said, "thank you for coming. I believe we've finally cleared up the confusion regarding this account." "Confusion?" I repeated softly. "That's a kind word for attempted theft." Melissa's voice cracked. "You can't do this. That money belonged to Michael, my husband." "I'm his widow." Agent Monroe folded her hands neatly. "Actually, ma'am, the account belonged to his father, Charles Crawford. Your mother-in-law here was the legal witness on the federal freeze order. This account has been under protection ever since your husband's unfortunate involvement with Mr. Henry Duvall's financial ring." Liam's head jerked up. "My dad, he wasn't part of any." I turned to him, my voice quiet but steady. "He didn't know. Henry used him to move the money just like he used Charles. That's why I kept the secret. I wasn't protecting myself, Liam. I was protecting your father's name." Melissa's face twisted. "You expect me to believe that? You, the woman who's been hoarding secrets and playing the victim for decades?" "No," I said, stepping closer. "I expect you to remember who sold the old house behind my back, who put the money in your name while my son was fighting for his life. I stayed quiet because Michael asked me to. But you You built your empire on silence you didn't earn. Agent Monroe cleared her throat. Mrs. Crawford, as of today, the freeze on account 03 FMB 2417 is being lifted. The funds are officially being transferred into a new trust under your name. You can designate beneficiaries when you're ready. Melissa's eyes widened in disbelief. You're giving her the money. She's senile. She probably doesn't even remember. Monroe's voice hardened. Careful, ma'am. Defamation of a federal witness carries its own weight in court. I turned toward Liam. For the first time, he couldn't meet my eyes. I thought you'd be different, I said quietly. You used to bring me daisies from the garden. You once told me you wanted to be kind like your father, but greed runs like a fever in this family. He swallowed his jaw tight. I didn't mean to hurt you, Grandma. I just wanted more. I finished for him. That's always how it starts. I pulled a small envelope from my purse and handed it to Agent Monroe. Inside is a copy of a recording from my living room security camera. It captured every word of their plan to declare me incompetent. Melissa gasped. You recorded us? No, I said with a faint smile. You recorded yourselves. You used your phone to test the sound during your meeting with Mr. Grant. My neighbor's Wi-Fi picked it up on the shared home network. You'd be amazed how technology works when the truth wants out. Agent Monroe took the envelope, nodded once, and slipped it into her briefcase. That'll do just fine. The meeting ended quickly after that. Melissa stormed out first, her heels clacking like angry metronomes against the floor. Liam followed, avoiding my gaze, muttering something about needing air. I didn't stop them. The truth has a way of following people even when they run. Mr. Wallace, the branch director, escorted me to a private room to finalize the trust papers. He was kind, respectful, the way men used to be in banks before the world got too fast. You've handled this with remarkable grace, Mrs. Crawford, he said. Grace, I murmured. That's one word for survival. He hesitated, then added quietly, there's also something else. A note attached to the original account. It's dated 1999, signed by your husband. My chest tightened. Charles. He nodded, sliding an aged envelope across the desk. It says, open only when truth is safe. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Inside was a single line written in his strong, slanted handwriting. The key unlocks more than money, Helen. It unlocks what they did to me. When I left the bank, the sky had turned golden, the light catching on the wet pavement like 1,000 tiny mirrors. I walked slowly, the envelope pressed against my chest. At the end of the block, a car door slammed. I turned. Melissa stood across the street, her makeup-streaked eyes blazing. You think you've won, she shouted. You have no idea what's coming. I smiled faintly. Neither do you. Then I got into my old Chevy and drove away, the sound of her fury fading behind me, like the closing notes of a song I'd finally finished. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the candy tin open before me. Inside was the brass key, still cold, still waiting. I placed Charles's letter beside it and whispered, All right, my love, let's finish what we started. Outside, thunder rolled again over Maplewood. Some storms come once and pass. Others circle back after 25 years to remind you that justice never really forgets its way home. Sometimes the moment you take everything back isn't loud or vengeful. It's quiet, precise, final. But tell me, if revenge and justice stood before you looking identical, how would you tell them apart? That night, sleep refused to visit me. I sat by the window in my small kitchen, a single lamp glowing above the sink, the brass key turning slowly between my fingers. Outside, Maplewood was silent, no cars, no voices, only the low hum of rain sliding down the glass. Charles's letter echoed in my mind. The key unlocks more than money, Helen. It unlocks what they did to me. For 25 years, I believed my husband died from stress, from heartbreak over Henry Duval's scandal. But now, with those words in my hands, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I drove back to the city, the kind of drive where every mile feels heavier than the last. The Maplewood Federal Archive sat on a quiet street near the courthouse, an old brick building that used to be a post office. Inside, the air smelled of damp paper and ink. At the reception desk, a young man looked up. Can I help you, ma'am? My name is Helen Crawford. I used to work for First Maplewood Bank. I'm here to access deposit box 2417. He typed something into his computer. That's archived under federal investigation status. I'll need to call a supervisor. A few minutes later, a familiar voice broke through the silence. I figured you'd come sooner or later, said Agent Monroe, stepping out from a side office. I read your husband's letter. Then you know there's more to this than stolen money. She nodded slowly. Follow me. We walked down a long corridor lined with locked doors until we reached a small steel vault. Monroe entered a code and gestured for me to use my key. My hand trembled as I slid it into the lock. It turned with a soft click. Inside was a small leather folder worn at the edges sealed with a wax stamp FMB Confidential. Monroe opened it carefully. Inside were several documents, including one that stopped my heart, a hospital toxicology report dated June 1999, the night Charles died. It listed a foreign compound in his bloodstream, a slow-acting sedative, one often used to simulate cardiac distress. My vision blurred. He didn't die of stress, I whispered. He was poisoned. Monroe's voice was low. The report was never filed with local police. The attending physician, Dr. Harris, was on Henry Duvall's payroll. Your husband must have discovered the embezzlement and tried to expose it. They silenced him before he could. I sank into the chair beside the vault. The truth felt like both justice and cruelty, and they let me believe it was his heart all these years. You weren't meant to find this, Monroe said gently. But now that you have, we can reopen the case. Henry Duvall may be gone, but there were others, silent partners, who inherited more than money. Later that afternoon, as I drove home through the rain, every street in Maplewood looked different. The bakery, where Charles and I used to buy coffee. The old park bench where we'd sit after work. The world had moved on, but it had carried his ghost with it. When I parked in front of my house, I saw a black SUV idling across the street. Tinted windows, engine running, watching. For a moment, fear gripped me, but then I smiled. So the ghosts are still alive, I murmured. Inside, I placed the toxicology report next to the candy tin on my table. Side by side, they looked almost poetic, sweetness and death, wrapped in one story. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should have left the past buried, Helen. Some things are meant to stay dead. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back a single line. So was my husband. Then I turned off the phone and closed the curtains. Tomorrow, I would visit the one person left who might know the truth about that night, the man who'd signed Charles's death certificate. Some secrets don't rest quietly. Some crawl out of the grave wearing the faces of the living. But tell me, if uncovering the truth meant reliving the worst night of your life, would you still open the door? The next morning, I drove to St. Augustine Medical Center, the same hospital where Charles died 25 years ago. The building looked newer, shinier, as if it had scrubbed away its sins with white paint and polished floors. But ghosts don't care about renovations. They live in the spaces memory refuses to forget. At the reception desk, a young nurse smiled politely. "Can I help you, ma'am? I'm looking for a retired doctor who used to work here. Dr. Robert Harris." She frowned, typing on her screen. "Dr. Harris. He still consults part-time. He's here on Thursdays." "Is today Thursday?" "Yes, ma'am. Room 312. Room 312 smelled of antiseptic and thyme. Dr. Harris was older now, thinner, grayer, but his eyes were still sharp behind his glasses. When he saw me, he froze. "Helen Crawford," he said slowly. "I wondered how long it would take." "You remember me. I remember your husband." I stepped closer, placing the toxicology report on his desk. "Then you know why I'm here." He stared at the paper for a long moment, then exhaled heavily. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way." "You mean murder?" He flinched at the word. "I didn't poison him, Helen. I was told to sign the report as natural causes. They threatened my family. Henry Duvall ran everything back then. Money banks, hospitals, even the police. Who else was involved?" He hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope yellowed with age. "I kept one copy of a letter Henry wrote that week. I knew it would matter someday." He slid it across the desk. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The letter was addressed to M.D. Crawford. "Michael Duvall Crawford," I read aloud. "My son." Dr. Harris nodded grimly. Your husband never told you. Michael was Henry's illegitimate child. Henry used your husband as cover to launder money through family ties. When Charles discovered it, he confronted Henry, and that confrontation killed him. The words hit me like glass shattering inside my chest. So all this time, my son was his biologically yes, but Charles raised him, loved him. He wanted to protect you both. That's why he left the note, when the truth is safe. I pressed my trembling hands to my face. 25 years of grief twisted into something else. Fury, betrayal, pity. Henry Duval is dead, isn't he? Yes. But his assets didn't vanish. They were absorbed by Maplewood Financial Holdings. His family still sits on that fortune, the same one your daughter-in-law married into. I lifted my head slowly. You mean Melissa knew, Doctor? Harris swallowed hard. She's a Duval Helen, Henry's niece. The room spun for a second, the sound of rain against the window growing louder, harsher. Every piece of the puzzle locked into place, the mansion, the arrogance, the reason Melissa's name always opened doors in this town. She hadn't married my son for love. She'd married him to reclaim the money her family lost. And I had handed her the map straight back to it. I left the hospital in silence, clutching the letter to my chest. Outside, lightning split the sky over Maplewood, illuminating the city in one fierce flash, as if the heavens themselves were signing a confession. When I got home, my house phone was ringing. I answered, my voice steady. Helen Crawford. A man's voice spoke on the other end, low, unfamiliar, deliberate. Mrs. Crawford, walk away from this. You've stirred something that doesn't forgive. Then they should have thought about forgiveness. 25 years ago, I said, and hung up. I sat down at the table, staring at the candy tin, again the symbol of everything simple that had turned complicated. The brass key still lay inside, shining faintly in the lamplight. It didn't just unlock money, it unlocked blood. Sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms. It comes crawling through the cracks of old lies. But tell me, if you discovered your whole family was built on a lie, would you burn it down or pretend not to smell the smoke? The next morning, Maplewood felt different. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy, thick with that strange stillness that settles after a storm when the world holds its breath before deciding what to do next. I sat at my kitchen table, the morning sun creeping across the floor, turning the brass key into a stripe of gold. The letter from Dr. Harris lay beside it, its words still echoing in my mind. Melissa is a Duval. I had thought the truth would bring me peace. Instead, it brought clarity, and clarity I was learning could be its own kind of pain. That afternoon, I drove to the old cemetery on Willow Grove Road, the place where Charles and Michael rested. The grass was wet, the sky a dull pewter. I carried a single daisy, Michael's favorite flower when he was little. I knelt beside the headstones, tracing their names with my fingertips. You tried to protect me, Charles, I whispered. But the truth has teeth. It always finds its way through. For a long time, I didn't move. I thought about Michael, about the boy who used to chase fireflies in the yard, who grew up believing in honesty because that's what his father taught him. And I thought about Liam so much like his mother on the surface, but maybe, just maybe, with a spark of his grandfather's heart buried under all that arrogance. I sighed. Maybe I've punished enough people already. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain and lilacs. It felt like an answer. When I got home, a letter was waiting in my mailbox, no return address. Inside a single sheet of paper and a photo, Melissa Younger standing beside a man I didn't recognize. On the back, written in the same elegant script as Henry Duval's old letters, were the words, "Blood doesn't forget." I didn't need to know who sent it. I already understood. There were still Duvals out there, people who thought power could outlive conscience. But I wasn't afraid anymore. That evening, I called Agent Monroe. "I'm ready to testify," I said. "You're sure?" she asked. "I've lived in silence long enough." A week later, I met Liam at a small diner near Main Street, the kind of place that still served pie with real whipped cream and called you sweetheart. He looked tired, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice small. "Grandma, I'm sorry." I watched him for a long moment before answering. For what you did, or for what you became? He looked down. Both. I softened then because I saw something I hadn't seen before, fear mixed with shame. That was the first honest emotion I'd seen in him since he turned 16. Your mother used you, I said gently, just like Henry used Michael. That's what people like them do. They twist love into a weapon and call it loyalty. He nodded slowly. She left town, said she needed time. Let her go, I said. Some storms are better watched from a distance. He hesitated, then reached into his jacket and placed something on the table, the candy tin. I think this belongs to you. I smiled faintly. Keep it. Why? Because it reminds you that sometimes the smallest, simplest thing can hold the biggest truths. He looked at it like it was the first real gift he'd ever received. Before he left, he turned to me. Grandma, do you hate us? I took his hand, old skin against young. Hate wastes the years I have left, I said softly. But I'll tell you what, I do have memory, and that's something you can't steal. That night, I sat by the window, again the brass key and Charles's letter beside a fresh cup of tea. Outside, the moonlight washed over the street like silver paint. For the first time in decades, my house felt quiet in a way that didn't ache. I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the betrayal, the secrets wrapped in candy foil, and realized that every step of it had led here, to this stillness, to this strange peace that wasn't forgiveness, but something stronger understanding. I whispered into the dark, you were right, Charles. The key didn't just unlock money, it unlocked me. The brass key caught the moonlight gleaming one last time before I placed it inside the candy tin and shut the lid. Then I wrote a note and tucked it underneath. For Liam, when you're ready to understand, open this. And remember that truth isn't meant to destroy. It's meant to set you free. I turned off the lamp, feeling the weight of everything that had come and gone. The world outside was quiet again, but it wasn't empty. It was waiting. And somewhere, out there in a city built on old lies and buried names, someone else had just opened a candy tin, one that held a secret of their own. Because truth never dies. It just waits for the right hands to open it. But tell me if peace came only after losing everything. Would you still choose to open the box a month past? Maplewood's gossip machine had quieted the scandal, fading like perfume after too many parties. Melissa hadn't returned. The FBI had built their case, and Agent Monroe called once a week with updates, each one shorter than the last. I thought the storm was over, but storms don't end, they just wait for softer ground. It was a Thursday morning when it arrived. A plain white envelope slid under my front door, no stamp, no return address. My name written in looping, elegant handwriting that looked almost familiar. Helen Crawford. I turned it over. Sealed in red wax. Old-fashioned, deliberate. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photo showed a man I'd never seen before, or at least I didn't think I had. Gray hair, sharp suit, standing in front of a black SUV. Behind him, blurred but unmistakable, was my house. The note was short. You think you've buried the Duvals. You haven't. The bloodline still breathes, and one of them knows what Charles took. At the bottom, a single initial M. My first thought was Melissa, but something about the handwriting was different, more masculine, older. I stared at the paper, tracing the wax seal with my thumb. It wasn't fear I felt this time. It was inevitability. Because Charles's last letter had said something else I'd ignored until now. The key unlocks what they did to me, not who, what. I went to the cabinet where the candy tin sat untouched, since I'd left it for Liam. Only now there were two tins. The original, and another one newer, polished, placed carefully beside it. I froze. On the lid of the new tin, someone had carved with a knife, open when ready. Inside a single golden key, not brass, gold. And beneath it, a business card, Maplewood Private Trust, Director Martin Duval. I hadn't just uncovered the past, I'd awakened it. I felt a tremor in my hands, half dread, half adrenaline. Somewhere in that old city, another Duval was waiting, and if Charles had taken something from them, it was something worth more than money. I looked out the window. The same black SUV from the photo idled under the streetlight. The driver didn't move, didn't even pretend not to watch. I smiled faintly, whispered to myself, "So it's not over." Then I folded the letter, locked the door, and reached for my coat. Because if they wanted their secrets back, they'd have to come take them from me. But tell me, when a story ends with a key in your hand and enemies at your door, would you hide or open it? If you followed me this far, you know the story didn't end with money or revenge. It ended with a key, a new one glinting in my hand under the porch light, daring me to turn it. Some nights I wonder if peace is just the moment before the next secret wakes up. Maybe Charles knew that. Maybe that's why he left me puzzles instead of closure. The Duvals can watch my house all they want. They can sit in their black cars whispering about inheritance and power. But they forget one thing: I've already survived the worst kind of theft, the kind that steals your trust. I'll find out what this new key opens. Maybe it's another vault. Maybe it's a grave. Either way, I'm not afraid anymore. Because truth once unlocked never fits back in the box. What would you do if the people who destroyed your past came knocking again and you held the key to their future? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to know what happens when I turn that last lock, subscribe, share this story, and stay tuned for part 2, The Duval Inheritance.